Good morning and welcome to this Friday in the 11th week of Ordinary Time. Today we celebrate a great solemnity, the solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And so the readings are particularly for this feast. But we stay in the Gospel of Matthew, and it's this passage where Jesus talks about yoking us to himself. Let me read this passage and then we'll reflect on it together. Come to me, all of you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves, for my yoke is easy and my burden light. This is one of my favorite images that Jesus uses to talk about our relationship with him. It's clear that in this image of a yoke that was common in those days when animals would be used to plow the fields, and how they would yoke the animals together. Often they were ox. And if you had more than one animal, you had to yoke them together. Otherwise, one would go faster than the other. One might veer off and go in another direction. So the importance of the yoke was to keep the animals going together in the rows of the field. And so Jesus takes this image to show that he wants to yoke us to himself. He doesn't want us to face anything by ourselves, to go through life on our own. And the reason why Jesus would need to say this is because you and I know so well that one of the strong tendencies of our fallen human nature is precisely self-reliance, where we want to go about life by ourselves. We want to deal with problems on our own. We want to control things our own way. But this is precisely what makes life harder. This is why he says, come to me, all of you who are heavy and burdened. Life is so much harder and heavier when we are in self-reliance and trying to deal with things on our own. And so there's three examples that came to my mind. There's many others we could talk about, but just to give three examples in order to know how this applies. So the first example is with regard to the hurts of life. When I allow myself to be yoked to Jesus, I now have a place to bring my hurts, those daily hurts of life. But when I try to deal with these hurts on my own, life now becomes heavier, because now I become burdened with my own anger. Sometimes there's also resentment that piles up, or bitterness, and other kinds of things that we feel when we are hurt. If I'm yoked to Jesus, and I can bring my hurts immediately to him, I can deal with them quickly and let them go, and then walk in greater freedom and lightness of spirit, and not be so weighed down by the hurts. Another example is that when we are yoked to Jesus, and therefore more united to his heart is an inexhaustible source of trustful surrender to God's will and joyful acceptance. But when I try to go about life on my own in a self-reliant way, pushing my way, trying to manipulate situations to go the way I want them to, trying to control and insist that things happen the way I want them to. And just this willfulness, this trying to force life to be a certain way, that is so much more harder. It makes our life so much heavier. But if I go to Jesus and remain yoked to him, I can now surrender trustfully to God, moment by moment in the day, and joyfully accept the things I cannot change. And with that comes so much peace, and not to be fighting against God and his will all day long, but peace, the peace of trustful surrender and joyful acceptance. The third example is we all have moments when we need to do something that we do not like to do. There's always things in life that are not our favorite things. And when we try to do these on our own, my goodness, how often we can bring a bad attitude. We can do them begrudgingly, only just half-heartedly, lazily, dragging our feet, putting on a sour face to those around us. That's what happens when we try to just do it on our own. But if we allow ourselves to be yoked to Jesus, his heart is an inexhaustible source of love. And if I can put love into something that I'm doing that is contrary to my nature, that is not my favorite thing, that is unpleasant, that love can make it lighter. Love has a way of sweetening things and lightening the burden. To do things out of love, we can do them with greater joy as well. So these are just 3 examples of the contrast between what life is like when I try to do it on my own and how I make things harder and things become heavier, versus when I allow myself to be yoked to Jesus. When I do things with Jesus, I go about my day with Jesus. Now things are lightened. I carry the yoke of trustful surrender, joyful acceptance, love, and freedom from the feelings around my hurts. So let us thank God for the gift of this feast day. Maybe let's reflect on maybe other examples that would be helpful for your life, further examples from my life. And let us live this day in union with the heart of Jesus. Amen. And make sure you also have some ice cream and make this day special in some way. I'll see you tomorrow.